On this episode of the SSPX Interview Series, we sit down with Father David Fulton, a diocesan priest of 21 years who has spent the last 2 immersed in the Society's priest training program. In this episode, Father speaks openly about the challenges he faced in a diocesan environment, particularly the limitations in liturgy, catechesis, and the transmission of the faith to souls hungry for clarity. We hear what first prompted Father to look more deeply into the traditional liturgy, why the SSPX stood out as the right path forward, and how he navigated the difficult break with his diocese. He gives us an inside look at the priest training program, especially its intellectual formation, liturgical training, and strong community life. Finally, he offers encouragement to fellow priests who may feel the same longing for tradition. Now preparing for his first SSPX assignment in Phoenix, Father Fulton joins us for episode 11 of the SSPX Interview Series, reflecting on what he's learned, what he's gained, and the work that still lies ahead. Well, welcome back to our SSPX Interview Series, and a very new face for the first time. First time I have met you, Father David Fulton. Great to meet you. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you, and it is great to have a new face, a fresh voice on not just the podcast, but with the Society of St. Pius X itself. Just as a quick rundown of what we're going to be talking about, Father Fulton, you have recently joined the Society of St. Pius X, have recently come over to the traditional side of things, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, just to kind of get some more information about, what it was like for you as a diocesan priest, what made you want to come over and become a traditional priest, et cetera. But I guess first, let's start with a little bit of background. So who's Father Fulton and who's David Fulton before he became a priest, and how was that journey?
Well, I was born in Tennessee in 1969. We were there for like 6 months and moved, so I couldn't tell you anything about the state or anything. We moved to Georgia, lived there when I was a toddler. Then we moved over to Texas. Lived in a small town south of Dallas until I was in second grade, moved to Huntsville, lived there the standard 10 years. It's a prison city, state of Texas. It's an essential prison town, and went there through my junior year. So I spent most of my formative years growing up in a Bible Belt. Mm-hmm. I was a dreaded CCD student, went to CCD for second grade, received First Communion, and that was it. And during my junior year, moved to San Antonio, and we lived in a city for the first time. And there was a Novus Ordo Catholic church that was down the street, and so I started going on my own. And I went there sporadically, and then I went after my senior year, 3 days after my high school graduation. I went to basic training for Blessed El Paso. And then after basic training, came back to San Antonio for advanced individual training for be a lab tech. And after that 4 months, I went into college. I went to the University of Texas, San Antonio. I majored in biology, and I was studying to be an optometrist. So I was taking pre-optometry prerequisites. I went to the first Gulf War in 1991. We went on January 1st, and we were there 5.5 months. And I was part of an evacuation hospital and out of Fort Sam Houston. Then went back to college, finished, worked for an optometrist for a year, kind of soured on the profession. And I was already feeling a call to the priesthood, even though I was self-learning the faith, because I didn't have much formation growing up. And looking back, it was probably a blessing because of where I was. In any event, I was reading books by the saints. I was reading Lives of the Saints, and that was very formative for me, not only in teaching me the faith, but also how to live out the faith and the sacrifice that it takes in overcoming sin, how to pray. And I after I graduated from college, I took various jobs, tried to get life experience before I would go to the seminary. And I was kind of putting the seminary off a bit. because I wasn't sure about my knowledge, but turned out that I had more knowledge than some of the seminarians.
Oops.
So as I was going through the process, my last year approaching the seminary, I worked at a Catholic bookstore for a year. And that gave me an education I would have never received in a seminary because I had access to all these books. I saw all sorts of flavors of Catholics and non-Catholics. I saw the politics from the diocese, etc. And so it was a real education. And so I kind of saw what was going on in the church, even though there wasn't a complete clarity, obviously. I left San Antonio, and it was basically a process of searching dioceses, other dioceses. Went on a road trip with two other men who were discerning the priesthood, who were in my parish. We went to Corpus Christi, and I wasn't, ironically, I wasn't sure about my Spanish. And so I looked north, and I had it down to 4 other dioceses, and I ended up in Omaha. And so I went to the seminary. I spent 5 years in the seminary. I actually left after my first year. I got sent to a bad seminary, and I ended up going over to the Byzantine Eparchy of Van Nuys. Bishop accepted me immediately, sent me to Mount Angel Seminary, and I spent a year and a half there with the Byzantines. I noticed with the Byzantines that there weren't a lot of faithful, but also the fact that modernism was already corrupting them, just like the Latin Church. And so that became something that was apparent to me. I had a pastor in Las Vegas, though, who was a Eastern Catholic priest who helped out in Novus Ordo parishes. Very intelligent. He had 7 degrees. He taught at the Angelicum in Rome before, but he was a modernist. He was teaching me things that really didn't resonate with me, but he taught me a work ethic as a diocesan priest, and taught me how to fundraise, which was very useful. He was a tremendous fundraiser. I went up to the seminary, and I had a pastor in Portland, Oregon. He was probably the most intelligent man I ever met. And he was pointing out things to me about the eparchy, and he was kind of saying, this might not be the place for you. I was kind of trying to be determined, but then at the end I thought, I was ready to be tonsured, and I decided to go to the rector and see what was his opinion, or if I could continue. So I went to the rector. I was expecting to be kicked out of the seminary, but the rector said, I have a slush fund, and I'll let you finish. I'll pay from the slush fund. You'll have time to enter it to another diocese, and then the diocese will just pay me back. Then you just continue on. And I about fell over. Yeah. So I went back to the Archdiocese of Omaha, finished time in the seminary, got ordained in 2002. So I'm a pretty ancient priest right now. And I started into my priestly life. Going into the priesthood, I noticed that the seminary was a big pep rally. People going, oh, we need you, continue, persevere. Mm-hmm. But I was experienced enough to know that these people who encouraged me was probably the same people I was going to be fighting in the parishes. Yeah. And so I already knew that I wasn't going to be so acceptable once I got ordained because of my bend. Yeah. So I have a ton of questions, and I'm not going to make this. I know this was just kind of the first section. I'm not going to make this too long, but correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you didn't have a lot of religious upbringing or experience in your youth, and so you were very much self-taught. Is it fair to say you were always seeking
what the truth was, what religion was all about, and you were very much a kind of a self-taught person through your time reading books, through your time at the bookstore. And then when you got to the seminary, you were like, these things don't feel right. Is that fair?
Yes. Regarding what's described as a good Novus Ordo seminary, isn't so much what they teach, it's what they don't teach.
Yeah.
So they may be teaching really good stuff that's right, but it's also what they don't teach. It's also important to realize that you have so many seminaries and they have to fill positions, and there are only so many moral theologians, so many systematic theology teachers, and to stay credited, they need them, and they might not get the best. And that's always any academic facility where you have more institution than you do people to fill it, you're going to run into that problem. Mm-hmm. And so that's a difficulty as well. And I kind of understood that.
Yeah. I was going to say, and I'm not a huge expert. I'm originally from the Midwest, and I have heard decent things about the Diocese of Omaha through the years. I've heard decent things about the seminary of the Archdiocese of Omaha. It doesn't seem like it's that, as far as diocesan seminaries and diocesan dioceses go, it doesn't seem like it's that much of a modernist or a terrible one, but you were seeing things that, again, didn't quite match, or things that you weren't being taught, like you said. And this isn't the SSPX podcast trying to bash your former seminary at all. I'm just trying to understand.
Right. The Novus Ordo in itself is flawed. When we think of what should have been handed on, we can really see the differences in the liturgy, the differences in magisterial teaching, the difference in the confused faithful, the difference of the interpretation of the church fathers and how they're often cherry-picked or misrepresented. Yeah. We can see the dismissal of the councils before the Second Vatican Council, and there was a systematic turning of the faithful against what should have been handed on, in fact, turning them towards a sort of hatred towards it. Mm-hmm. And this was something that was very present, and there was a general lack of catechesis, and going from parish to parish, people were very Protestantized. And so in the Novus Ordo diocese, some of them have a reputation for orthodoxy, but it's by degree. They just aren't as modernist as others, but there's that presence.
Yeah.
So there was that incongruity. And even though I was seeing that I was standing out, seeing that I was put in the periphery of the diocese, never really occurred to me that I would why I was out there until I had talked to this one priest, and he said we were talking about what was happening in the diocese and the closing of parishes and the lack of ordinations, the lack of the dropping number of seminarians, the pairing of parishes, and I brought up, we're doing the right thing. We're trying to do the right thing. He said, yeah, but, there's consequences to that. And I said, well, what are they going to do? Send us out here? He goes, well, that's why we're where we are. And so I didn't really realize it, because I figured I'm servicing people. I knew it was a rural diocese primarily. And he kind of pointed out that we were where we were because of who we were.
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of my next question. So you were ordained in 2002, and then you were assigned a parish, or you were assigned to be a part of a parish. And it sounds like you were kind of the Nebraska equivalent of Siberia. So where were you assigned, and what were your first duties?
My first assignment, I was in a parish in West Omaha, which is full of a lot of Creighton graduates. And so they're trained by Jesuits, and so they have that bend. I was in a parish that looked like an office building, a church that looked like an office building. tabernacle was in the cry room, and it was unlocked, and people were helping themselves to the Blessed Sacrament. The sanctuary, or what they put up as a sanctuary, was on speaker boxes. And eventually they made a sanctuary while keeping the configuration of the pews in the round. And that was my first assignment. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I was calling the bishop, complaining, telling him, because I thought, how would the bishop not know this? Because he goes around for confirmations. He's seen these parishes. And I was kind of naive in that sense. But the bishop, the archbishop on his part, was, to his credit, was given the pastor directives to change this, change that. And even though I was an associate, I was able to make a significant positive change each month, at least one. I got Eucharistic adoration in the parish, and there were people who were appalled at it, because anything that existed before the Second Vatican Council was seen to be as being something of the past. It shouldn't be reintroduced. And so I was able to do that, and I was able to do so through catechizing a significant amount of the faithful. I taught a Catholic doctrine class. I had an average of 40 people per week, and people would just shake their heads and comment, it's like I've never heard the faith before. Or, well, I thought this was the case. And I'd say, well, this is what you've been taught. This is what the church teaches. So I was able to catechize, and catechesis was a major tool that I used throughout my 21 years in the Archdiocese. And so some people stayed in the parish and they sought to bring about changes. Other people went to better parishes. Some people made it into the society. I was kicked out of that parish after 2 years, and gladly. And the bishop called me in. He says, I sent you there to loosen you up. And I looked over at him. I said, oh, you must mean break my faith. And he was all quiet. And I said, well, how do I trust you now?
Yeah.
So he sent me to my second associate assignment, and I spent 4 years there. And I thought I was going to spend 3, but the pastor requested me for an extra year. So I had to spend a 4th year, because in the diocese, it was policy that priests spend 6 years as associates, split up between 2 parishes. Mm-hmm. Then I had my first pastorship. And so all this time, as a priest from ordination, you enter into a work vortex. So there isn't a lot of time to study. There isn't a lot of time to evaluate things. And so I was reading Warren Carroll's Christmas series because it was a weak subject in the seminary. Our seminary history program was kind of high schoolish. So I was reading through it as I progressed and as I could. I was also, whatever I studied, it was for the sake of the faithful, having to do in my service for my classes I gave them or whatnot. And so it was specific, so I wasn't able to look much beyond that. Then, so in that assignment, I was south of Yankton. I had 3 parishes. I had an elementary school. I taught 7th and 8th grade theology. I had responsibilities for the nursing homes and over a 25-mile area. And I had responsibility over the Hispanics in the area. And so it was like having a 4th parish. It was like having 4 parishes.
And still not speaking very much Spanish. Or did you learn pretty quick? Make a long story short, I took 2 years of Spanish in high school, 2 in the seminary. And in each case, it was like taking Spanish 1 over a 2-year period. So I had a bag of vocabulary, but couldn't string words together. Had no grammar. So in my second assignment, I went down to Guadalajara, Jalisco, and I spent 6 weeks and every day did immersion. I had a grammar teacher in the morning. I had a
conversational teacher in the afternoon. And I had enough to where I could put words together. And then I went back into the parish, my second assignment, and built up my vocabulary. Got somewhat fluent. I went to Yankton. I didn't get to use Spanish much. I went south to Yankton and wasn't able to do Spanish much. And then I went through that assignment. It was 6 years. I got reassigned for 6 more years. I got moved after 3 as the bishop wanted me to go over to South Sioux City. So I went over there, and it was a very intense assignment, pressure cooker assignment, lots of stress. And basically, I worked the whole time. There was a lot of work to do, to say the least. And so I had a 2,100 family parish. I had 6 masses a Sunday, and my own. I had Novus Ordo has vigils, so I had 2 vigils. And I was basically walking from one thing into another, so it forced more Spanish fluency. And I was able to get up and give a homily with no notes or anything, just get up and present it. I was able to go and give classes in Spanish, so I was getting very, very fluent. And I had a mission parish as well with Hispanics. So at my 6th Mass on Sunday, I had to drive 25 miles and take care of that Mass as well. So after 2 years, 8 months, the bishop moved me to another parish cluster that was on the opposite corner of the diocese. So I was there for 6 years, and there it was like a retirement job. All I had were 3 parishes. I didn't have a school, and there was time to study. By that time, on the Christendom series, I was getting up to the French Revolution. And so I started reading up on that. I learned about A Lay of Good Success, had opportunities at Catholic bookstore. I learned about it, but I didn't read about it or anything. But read about A Lay of Good Success. I read about the Freemasons. I read about the reasons for the French Revolution, attacks against Christendom in the church, the Western culture. Then I went into called to mind the philosophers from the 19th century going into the 20th century. I also reviewed the Marian apparitions and saw their reason and timing. And then I looked at the 20th century, and I looked at Vatican II. And I thought, not only am I incongruent, but I'm lacking integrity. Because I'm celebrating this Mass. I know it's been cut to shreds. I am teaching these classes, but I can only teach the people so far regarding the faith. And they're looking around them and saying, well, this priest is doing this, priest is doing that, priest is teaching this, priest is teaching that. And so I had that going up against the teaching that I was giving. And so part of my teaching when I would begin would be teaching about sacred tradition, sacred scripture. And then speaking about sacred tradition, I'd have to give the preamble. There are times in the church where we have the faith. The church has indefectibility, meaning that she'll last intact till the end of time. It's just that at times the faith is more difficult to recognize or to find and to live out. And so I would bring it back to the lives of the saints, the writings from the saints. The saints who have been vetted, those writings have been vetted, who aren't going to change, who aren't going to apostatize. So I said, stick with them, and that'll give you a sense of what the true faith is. So I had to give these explanations going to various topics. As I didn't really know what the SSPX was, rather than people saying stay away from it, I began to watch the YouTubers because I was watching things I knew my parishioners were watching, and I wanted to address things that may not have been very good or build on things that were good in my homilies and my classes and such, and make reference to them if people were watching them. And I began to learn about independent priests, council priests. And I started learning about the SSPX. And all the while I was in the diocese for my first year, I was thinking I was stuck due to being incarnated in diocese, stuck because of the promise of obedience. And that was a real sticking point for me. And
Sure.
I had to think through it and consider the fact that obedience is contingent upon faith. Faith is contingent upon obedience. So if I'm being forced to do things I see that weren't meant to, that aren't consistent with the hand-on faith, then I don't follow it for the good of my salvation, for the good of my soul, for the good of my personal integrity as a priest. And so in 2021, I called up Father Fulton over at the district office and decided to inquire. My sister one of my sisters had actually joined a society parish in 2018. When she called me, she said, well, I joined the society. I said, oh, good. And I thought, I wish I had the freedom of movement that a layperson has.
Yeah.
And so she went to the society. The straw that broke the camel's back was that her bishop at the cathedral on the Novus Ordo feast of St. Catechesis had Navajos come into the church and beat their drums and do a pagan rite within the cathedral. And so for her, that was it.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'm stuck. I'm glad that she could find integrity, but I was thinking I can't get away. So once I kind of got a sense of the fact that I could, I went to Father Fulton. He gave me paperwork to fill out, and he said, "Okay, you're fine. I'll refer you to Father Robinson over in Denver." So,
before we get there, I know, and I've talked to many priests and priests who have done what you've done, come over to the society, and I keep wanting to say the word transition into traditional, but that seems like such a weird word to use nowadays. But how did you, could you speak a little bit more about overcoming that sense of obedience, which sounds like I'm trying to get you to explain being disobedient, and that's not really it. Because I know that there are probably a lot of priests out there who feel the same way you do, feel like they are not able to perform 100% as a priest, that they have to edit themselves, that they have to be something that they're not in order to not tick off their bishop or tick off the parish council, or have the things that happen to you. And it sounds like for a while you were like, well, I am stuck. I did take a vow of obedience to my bishop, and that's a vow, and that's a real thing. I know you talked about your sister's last straw, but how were you able to find peace with your decision that I'm able to do this because it's not a matter of obedience?
It came down to, and this was a long realization I had, that leadership was undermining itself by not following what it was supposed to be. And there were times where I tried to make sense of the changes that happened at and after the Vatican Council. I was thinking about the changes in the Mass, and I was thinking, well, maybe the church decided to change the Mass because the priests were not celebrating the Mass the way it should have been celebrated. I heard about traditionally minded priests celebrating the traditional Mass and bragging about how fast they celebrated it. And I thought, well, how reflective could those Masses have been? Reverent. I thought about the fact that the Novus Ordo priests, so many of them were speaking the language of the people, facing the people, and they were still doing the things that they were doing. And I thought I could imagine what priests were doing, priests like these priests were doing, when people couldn't hear what they were saying, were they even consecrating the Blessed Sacrament, So I was thinking through all of that, trying to reason why these changes would take place. But the fact is that we have a intact tradition that should have been passed on, tradition with a capital T, that's supposed to be unchangeable, that is supposed to keep the integrity of the faith. And eventually I thought, there's never been a utopia in the church, but we have the instruments in order to maintain the true faith, to where we can find it, seek it and find it. And so that we can not only keep it intact for our generation, but pass it on to the next. Regardless of what people in the past or present were doing regarding what was going on in the church, we had these intact engines in the church that kept the church going, that kept the faith intact. And there was obviously a breach. Once I realized that, accepted it, I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? And listening to podcasts and whatnot, I thought, okay, there's a way out of here. Another thing that was drawing me back, I felt so bad for the faithful. I felt bad for my parishioners, but a priest has to move anyway. And I would move and the next priest would tear up what I did, or he wouldn't be able, the first thing priests would do after I left would be to reduce it, would be to lessen the schedule. And if they didn't just destroy what I did. So I keep forgetting his name, but it's kind of like the Greek mythology figure who would push the boulder up the hill and then get it up there and then it would fall down and have to push it up again. It's kind of what it was like in the parishes. And I described this to another priest. He goes, no, it's worse than that. It's like you push the boulder up the hill, it rolls back on you and flattens you. You go down the leaf like a cartoon. You fall on the bottom, you reconstitute yourself, and then you get up and you start pushing again. So this was the cycle.
Yeah.
So
I have heard that same thing from priests as well, who are very traditionally minded, who are very good priests, who feel stuck, quote unquote, in the diocesan assignment where they are, and they go, well, but if I leave, someone worse is going to come. I can't abandon my flock. And I empathize with that idea, but as you said, you're going to get moved anyway.
And ultimately, it's a spiritual attachment that you have to get over. And if you teach your people, they'll find their way. You have to give your people credit for their intelligence and their ability to do what they need to do, that they have faith, that they have movement by the Holy Ghost to recognize things as they are and do something about it. And so then it was 5 years since my assignment when I contacted Father Fulton. I was expecting to be gone from the diocese that summer. And I made a trip out to Denver, talked to the priests of the priory, met Father Robinson personally. I was already taking distance classes with him. He was giving me tests and assignments, and I was doing those. They were basically playing the hits regarding church documents, and he was comparing them to the Second Vatican Council documents. And I'd been exposed to this in the seminary. We had a seminary professor taught philosophy, and he would take us to a traditional Dominican parish up in Portland, Our Lady of the Rosary, and we played mental ping pong, going over the documents and going over the lack of clarity and what they might mean. So I was already exposed to that and saw the lack of clarity. I never believed that we share the same faith as the Muslims. And so I rarely recognized that, but I just kind of chose to ignore it and taught differently. Mm-hmm. So when I was leaving the priory to go back to the diocese, the priests were wondering why I was returning. And I said, well, I have responsibilities of the parish. Well, why are you going? Where are you going? So I went back to the diocese. I was already jettisoning my stuff because I was planning when I left to pack my car like a college kid and just drive off. But I was also thinking that I had to get kicked out by the bishop. So I was sponsoring a teenager for confirmation at my prior assignment. Made a point with the bishop, and everybody was people had heard that I was having a meeting with a bishop, and I think the bishop himself was thinking I was going to ask to be pastor there again because I was pretty popular. And so we met, and I told him I wanted to join a religious order, and he was kind of surprised, taken back. So he goes, well, when I was your age, I had the same feeling, but it passed. But we'll talk about later. And he said, what are you thinking about? And I was pretty much thinking I was going to join the society. But I threw in a couple of orders on the list because who knew if I changed my mind. And he goes, well, one of those isn't in union with the church. And I was thinking, one of those isn't in union with the church. What would that be? So he wouldn't even say the society's name. And he said, well, we'll talk about it later. So I was thinking, well, I'm still here. So I went back to my assignment.
That didn't work.
Started getting ready to move. I sent him a letter asking him to go on a sabbatical or whatever he wanted to call it, take time off. I said, it's difficult to be looking for a place to go and doing pastoral work. He goes, no, do your job and you can do this. They said, we'll talk about it later. And I was thinking, well, I don't really want group participation. And as I was approaching the end of my term, my 6 years, I was thinking, well, I'm not kicked out yet. What do I do? And Father Robinson was trying to bore it into my head that I could just leave. And I was thinking, how do you just leave? And I just leave. And once that clicked, I thought, well, I can just leave. I wrote a letter to the bishop and said, I'm leaving. He was already assigned me to another assignment. And I said, no. I said, no. I'm going to go to Denver. I'm going to leave. And then he started telling me about, well, you're going to lose money. You're going to take a pay cut. A lot of what he was first arguing about was materialistic things. You're going to lose your retirement. And I thought, I'll pay that for personal integrity. Father Fulton had told me that when I met with him, that priests would cave over that. They would be afraid of losing their retirement. Some priests are looking forward to their retirement, whether it's 65, 70, 75, depending upon the diocesan policy, and they're looking towards retirement because it seems as though through the seminary and through this whole process, it's a faith-breaking machine. And priests just learn to put their heads down, take their paycheck, and look through brighter pastures when they can be the priest that they want to be, but they're retired. And who's going to set them in their parish because they're going to be different? So a lot of priests just get the faith beaten out of them, and they get timid and put their heads down, and they don't have any fight in them. So a lot of priests who in the seminary were saying the right things, didn't back it up when they got ordained.
Yeah.
So
can we go back just for a minute? Was there any formal process? I know you said you met with Father Fulton, who's the U.S. District Superior, and then you met with Father Robinson, who's currently in charge of the priest training program, which we'll talk about here more in a minute. But I'm sure on Father Fulton's side, it must have been, okay, who's this Father Fulton and what's he like and what does he do? Like, was there any kind of vetting or any sort of process like that you had to go through on that end? What was that process like? Was it fairly easy or?
For me, it was easy. There's always a background check, legal background check, checking background. And so there is a vetting process. There's an application. So all that's done. And then part of this 2-year program with the society, a priest training program, is to get to know the priest. Can he handle living a community life? Can he keep the schedule? Is he Orthodox? Is he carrying on the traditional faith? What's his mental capacity? What is his mental situation? And so it's a means by which, as Father Robinson put it, the society gets to know the priest and the priest gets to know the society. And then they, at the end or towards the end, they draw their conclusions as to how the priest will be categorized. And so as far as being a full member, it's being a associate, being not taking the promises with the society, but being running a chapel or whatnot, or being a friend to the society, being linked in but not formally. So that's part of the purpose of this program.
Okay. So you got to Denver and I'm sure you had some friends, or maybe you had already burned the bridges. Sorry, I don't know. But what were your priestly friends or faithful, or what were people saying back home in Nebraska when you left?
Actually, a lot of people didn't know about it. I just left. It was a perfect time to leave. It was the end of my 6-year term. The bishop was going to be retired that next year. It turned out it was the following year. So they have a new bishop. As I told the bishop, nobody's going to know me. This is the perfect time to leave, so I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
And then people started finding out and came up with their own opinions based on what they know or didn't know. The people who are close to me, the people who went to my classes, they were very supportive. And they understood why I left. I'm still in contact with some of my former parishioners, and it's by degree of how much they understand what the society is, or what the degree of crisis is in the church. And so it just depends on where they are in their faith and their understanding.
Okay. Sure. So you entered the priest training program, which currently is in Denver. What is the priest training program like? And we talk about it sometimes on the podcast. This is one of those things that is not very well known, but to me, it's one of the most important apostolates that the Society of St. Pius X does, which is, supporting priests like you who realize there's something missing, realize there's something wrong, and then bringing you not so much up to speed. Well, yeah, up to speed, but what does the priest training program entail? Is it like a classroom? Is it more immersion and you just kind of become part of the St. Isidore's parish in Denver, not parish, but the chapel community in Denver? What is that program like?
Well, first of all, priests come in different degrees of knowledge, experience in the traditional rites. And so as I was going to make my move, Father Robinson was saying, well, this is a leap of faith. This is a leap in the dark, but we will provide for you. We'll take care of you. You aren't going to be left out there dangling. So when I came out here, the priests were very patient. It was an adjustment for me, even seeing priests who shared the same faith with me. And it was an adjustment with the time schedule. In the diocese, I ran wild hours. I'd be like up till 5. I'd be up until 1 the next morning. And just a wild schedule. As I said, it was a work vortex. And getting used to community prayer when I was used to praying on my own all the time, praying in my office. One thing with my being with Father Fulton is he asked me if I prayed in my office, and I said, of course I pray in my office. We promise that our ordination will pray the divine office. But I was shocked that there were priests who abandoned praying the divine office. I thought, man, that's really basic.
Yeah.
But praying in common was something that was really different, and praying in Latin. I knew Spanish pretty well, even though in my last assignment I didn't speak it very much. It's still up here. I just need to fire up the synapses again. But I had to get an ear for it. So my first month, I was lost on the office. The chanting sounded like buzzing to me. I couldn't pick up the words. And it was a time of confusion. I was celebrating the traditional Mass off and on from 2007 with Pope Benedict's Motu Proprio. I started doing it, but again, I was self-taught, quote unquote. Sure. And I had wide gaps of time when I celebrated it. My fourth assignment, I could only celebrate it like once a month, and twice on First Fridays, First Saturdays. Took me forever to do it. And then my last assignment, the restrictions started coming in. I was restricted on a Friday afternoon, and there were breaks in that too. So I came into the priory, even what I knew I had to correct, or thought I knew I had to correct. So Father Robinson watched me celebrate the Mass, and he was saying, where do I even start? Because there are 100 things that I had to correct. Wow. I was doing so many things wrong. And so he took it piece by piece, and I was able to correct. I had never sung a Mass because my health was generally bad. And so when I did sing, it was very short, and I had never sung a Mass. So singing in public, that was new to me. I didn't know how to read music. I was really underwater. And living a community life, sharing meals with people. When in the diocese, I would eat in the car on the way from one thing to another. That was something that was very different. So it was a tremendous adjustment. Then our classes, there were 2 classes a day. I had already taken church doctrine classes. I was ahead in the program with that. I had to learn a lot liturgically about the traditional calendar, traditional rites. So there was a lot of catch up there. And then there was moral theology, make sure that I had a grasp on traditional moral theology. And a lot of it I knew. It was just a repackaging of knowledge. And then there was a process of, after the moral theology test, hearing confessions in the society. So we got my own little nameplate with my name on it, and nice. So I could write a passage and back in a hot box, hearing confessions. Yeah. And and then from the get-go, being in the cycle of the Mass, starting on the side altars and then moving up to the main altar, and then moving up to a sung Mass, to a high Mass, doing all the parts of the high Mass, the subdeacon part, the deacon part. And that was an adventure because I had never served a high Mass before. And from the first assignment where I started celebrating the traditional Mass, I never had servers because I couldn't find anybody to serve. So I had to kind of put things together and at the same time. So I was learning things that our school students were learning, and I was learning things that priests were learning, that seminarians were learning. And it was a high learning curve, which I expected. So took a lot of humility. I'm too arrogant to be embarrassed, so a normal man would have been embarrassed a lot of times. And so I kind of found my way through.
That. I got to steal that. That's a great line, Father.
Yeah. And being my age, going in at 53 years old, changing can be a pretty tough thing. And so there's a big life transition there, along with putting together all these pieces and learning. And this past year, I taught in the school, of course, junior high, where I'm always put. And that was very fun to do.
Yeah.
And I've been going on mission trips. And so I've been going to various chapels, flying to them on particular weekends, subbing for priests. And it gives me an idea of what other chapels are like. It also gives me a idea of flexibility of using different mass cards and basic things like that. And being in slightly different environments. So basically, it's a 2-year course, depending on how much one has to learn, determines how intense it is. And so I'm almost done with the program, so I get assigned out in August. So I'll be able to be back in the saddle regarding care of a chapel and carry on the priory life.
Yeah. What was it? It almost sounds like the biggest adjustment for you was a lack of, I mean, obviously, like you said, there was a lot of work, there was a lot of study, and it was probably overwhelming and hit you in the face a time or two. But it almost sounds like the community life allowed you to just slow down a little bit, and that was a big adjustment for you.
It did. I've hated school since 4th grade.
Yeah.
And that itself was an adjustment, going back to school. But it was a slower life to allow me to study and to take in what I was doing. And it's a real gift for a priest to have time to study because, as I said, most priests are ordained and they go into a work vortex.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to study as we should and continue to build on our knowledge and competence. And it becomes very difficult because the days are literally a series of events.
Yeah.
And so coming out of the
interior life of, sorry, go ahead.
So coming out of the diocese, it was kind of like being in an escape room and finally finding the door.
Yeah.
And I was able to gain a lot of experience and pastoral things. But again, and I loved it. It was addictive, loved the work. And it came to a point to where it was a matter of personal integrity. And so I didn't have any choice but to find the door and get out.
Yeah. I was just going to say, and pardon me for interrupting you, that the interior life of a priest, and I'm not just talking about you, and I'm not making any judgments about you or any other priest, but objectively, the interior life of a priest is going to suffer if they are just sucked into a get things done constantly mode. There has to be a time spent every day for prayer and meditation, and if that's missing, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, there's a spiritual skill in making order out of chaos. This is something I learned from the Byzantine priests down in Las Vegas, that the diocesan priest does make order out of chaos in his day, but there's, no matter how hectic a day is, there's always order. So there's always time to pray your office. And prayer and reflection isn't just sitting in a chair, navel gazing or whatever. It is being recollected, so that you go to a nursing home and you see Christ in the elderly. You go to a hospital and you see the suffering Christ, the injured or the sick, and you're caring for the sick. You think about the saint of the day whom you're imitating. You practice works of mercy. You go to classes, and that's meditation. A homily is a meditation. That's why I don't use notes. Archbishop Fulton used to read his homilies until a woman came up to him and said, if you can't remember your homily, how do you expect us to remember it?
Oh.
And so there's truth to that. And
yeah.
Homily is a meditation, and it's a product of meditation. And having that skill, there's no need for notes. There's no need to read, because it's in your head and you're responding to what you've read in the gospel. And you may think about during the week. you meditate on it, and then you give the product to feed your people.
Mm-hmm.
So the meditation part doesn't get washed out due to workload, but it's incorporated into it. And there's a thing called riding the Holy Ghost, where you're going through your day and you're finding the opportunities that the Holy Ghost gives you to perform works of mercy, to teach, to catechize, evangelize. And that's part of the meditation. That's part of being recollected, seeing those opportunities, seeing God's hand throughout the day, and riding that path until your head hits the pillow.
Yeah. Well, you had talked about wrapping up the priest training program, and you're almost done, and you're still there in Denver, and you're in actually Father Robinson's office. I'm half expecting him to pop in at any second. But you're going to be, you said you're going to be stationed here in August, and I'm fortunate because, and you're very unfortunate because you and I will be spending a little bit more time together. You're going to be down here in Phoenix. Do you know what you're going to be doing in Phoenix? Do you know what your duties are going to be? Is it kind of open? And what are you expecting or looking forward to? Or what are you nervous about?
I don't really get you nervous about anything. I go from parish to parish, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to be living the priority life. I'm going to be keeping the schedule. I'm going to be praying the office and community. I'm going to be living out. I'll be the promises I'll make as a member of the society. I'll be teaching at the school, and I anticipate I'll be teaching junior high again because that's where I'm always put.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it.
I mean, at this point, Father McFarland's got to put you in junior high. That's just going to have to happen.
Yeah. There's a saying about teaching junior high kids, you keep it random and awkward in their world, and there's truth to that.
Yeah.
And so I have the mind for it. And I'll be pastor over the chapel in Albuquerque.
Oh, great.
And so I'll be going there for all 5 weeks. So I'll be carrying on the basic schedule, and then the rest of the events of the day are up to God.
Yeah.
So I know the general pattern, and then see how things materialize. And so I don't get excited because it's the same work. I don't get scared because I don't get scared. And I go in for the experience, and I always love it. And I love the challenge. I love the building. I love the development. I love catechesis. I love teaching. And so all those elements are available no matter where I go.
That's great. You said that you were going to be making, are you a member of the SSPX officially yet or not yet? Or
no, it takes 3 years.
Okay.
So I did my profession of faith the other day, and I did the oath against modernism.
Mm-hmm.
December 8th, I'll make what are similar to, I guess, simple promises. And then the process takes 3 years. So it's continued vetting. Mm-hmm. And then after that 3 years, I'll be accepted as a member. And I think that's what it sounds like that's what the society's plan is for me. I'll become a full member, and then be mobbed up with everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any other things that I didn't think to ask you about that you want to mention or talk about, or anything in particular that kind of struck you about this journey? That sounds kind of milquetoast to say, but anything else you want to bring up?
Well, for any priests who are considering the society and they're having reservations, basically your personal integrity is worth more than material things. It's worth more than feeling pressure from your bishop. It's worth more than whatever you're attached to. It's a matter of comparing what should have been handed on and what we're experiencing now, and seeing that it's incongruent, and that it's worth keeping your personal integrity rather than looking, quote, normal in the Novus Ordo world. It's worth getting into to getting away from Novus Ordo stuff. And part of being here in the program is going through Novus Ordo detox and just shedding the stuff that you're congruent with what was supposed to be handed on in the tradition. And so whatever you trade for this, all that stuff's worth it. I put it behind me, and I'm looking forward and hoping for the best of my parishioners. I'm looking for the best of the diocese. I'm hoping for the best for the entire church. But I've got to work for my own soul, and so do you. And so your ultimate goal is your salvation, and that involves adhering to what's been revealed to us in its fullness and its integrity, and of living it out, of having it reflected in our prayers, words, and works. And it's worth whatever we trade for that. This, what's been Jesus has revealed and given to us is a pearl of great price. And so we trade all that stuff away that we're attached to, make a leap of faith, and we get with the program.
Yeah. Father, thanks for having the integrity to find it, to seek it, and to go for it. And I know you said you don't get scared or nervous, but I'm sure at some point it was, what the heck am I doing? That thought had to have crossed your mind at some point through this process. And I applaud your willingness to put it all in the hands of God and to realize that this is your integrity you're talking about, and this is what you're going to be judged on. And there's not many who would do that. So that you deserve some credit for that.
The big thing was the how-to.
Yeah.
The attachment part. As soon as I found out that I could just go, I went.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you. I'm glad you said that. And we'll see you here in August in Phoenix, and hopefully for many more years, helping to catechize the faithful and celebrate the Mass for many thousands more souls.
Absolutely. That's what it's about.
All right. Thanks, Father. Have a great day.
You too. God bless you.
You too.